usually start a talk with a joke. Some of you know me, I'm a pretty funny guy. But I have never been stumped in 30 years of giving talks as I have just in the last few minutes. I don't know what to say. I have been with Chuck all over the world, Israel. We've been just recently running around in caves, and of course, he just to see the glow on his face when he sees some new archaeological discovery, and to be able to show him that has been an exceptional experience for me. When I was a young police officer in Costa Mesa, California, I used to go with a man named Sig Swanstrom, who was my partner. We had five people in the CSI back then, and 3 of them had been killed in the line of duty, and only 2 of us survived. And one of them is Sig Swanstrom, who was my mentor, and he said, "Bob, let's go to this Bible study with Chuck Missler." And the young cop, I'm going there, and we went every week. And when you drink from the well of Chuck Missler, you drink from a pretty deep well. And it's pure, and it's truth. So I kind of, I got my sea legs under the guidance of Chuck. The thing I want to say is that archaeology, and I'm not an archaeologist, I'm a Bible explorer, I'm a researcher. I use those skills as I learned as a police officer to try and find these lost locations in the Bible. Archaeology is overrated. It's more of an art than a science. Archaeology is really the study of durable rubbish. What does this big chunk of old stuff mean? If you have inscription, it really helps out, but then you're subject to interpretation. And let me tell you, scholars have a lot of agenda behind them. And I have never been so surprised as I have in the last couple of months to see the agenda of scholars come out. When you show them evidence, evidence isn't proof, it's the proper interpretation of evidence that is the proof. We need to figure out what the Bible really is saying to us. In fact, to illustrate that, why don't we just play a little song right now? I want to illustrate hermeneutics. It's a great song that helps us understand how to interpret the Bible. Can we just run that little song, please?
Little scoop, you don't know what I got. Well, I'm not bragging, babe, so don't put me down. But I've got the fastest set of wheels in town. When something comes up to me, you don't even try. 'Cause if you had a set of wings, man, I know she could fly. She's my little scoop, you don't know what I got. Just a little scoop with a...
Some of you out there that are going down memory lane, some of you are saying, who are those guys? And all of you are saying, what the heck is he doing playing Little Deuce Coupe to talk about the Bible? Well, that song was written in the 1960s by a guy named Brian Wilson. And he was writing to the car wonks at the time. And he was describing things as Little Deuce Coupe. What's a Deuce Coupe? Anybody know what a Deuce Coupe is? Holy moly. Who said that? Who said 32 Ford? We have another. How many people knew it was the 32 Ford? I never have anybody know that that's a 32 Ford. Okay, so you've ruined my whole talk. We're going to go on to the next thing we're talking about. God, you could have lied about it. You can see me if you're sweating, Okay, Little Deuce Coupe. It's a 1932 Ford. After World War II, we literally had no cars made during the war. We made bullets and tanks and bombs, and the manufacturers were making things for the war effort. And after the war, a flood of guys come back, pocket full of money and no cars to buy. So what they do, they go to the junkyards and they buy these old cars. One of them was the 32 Ford. The 2 at the end of the 3 means it's a 1932 or a Deuce Coupe. All right? I always thought it was a 2-seater, right? You say that Deuce Coupe, you think it's a 2-seater? Well, okay, here's another one. What are lake pipes? Oh my goodness, gracious mercy me. Okay. What are they?
It turns into a shredding sauce. It comes in before all the mouth work.
Okay, what does it mean when it's ported and leaned and stroked and bored? A lot of money? All right. Okay, all right. All right, well, the whole point of this is that everybody knew during that time, and especially you guys knew, you're back, right? You know about this. That's a 32:4. He knew what it meant, and that's what we have to do in studying the Bible, is you have to go back and figure out what the authors meant. Sometimes you have to go back to the time, what they were saying when they wrote these things. But the Bible, the Deuce Coupe song is, I got a little Deuce Coupe, and it says, I'll do 140 in the top end floored, right? Well, a Deuce Coupe couldn't do 140 if it was being towed by a DC-10, okay? But, that's a little bit hyperbolic. But those terms were known. And so let's say we took that song we just played, and we go back, and we have in the future, some people come back, and they go to a museum, and they see an 8-track tape. You're so old we could carbon date you. I mean, you know all these old things. You got barnacles on you, okay? Good night. Okay, he knows that. He's over there going, yes, okay. And okay, do you know a 4-track tape? Did you ever have a 4-track tape? I had a 4-track tape in a Volkswagen. It's pretty cool. Okay, so you come back and you get this 8-track tape and you play it, and you're playing the Little Deuce Coupe. And you know what these guys are going to do in 1,000 years? These scholars are going to sit around a table and they're going to play it, and they're going to say, this is what was going on 1,000 years ago. It says a Little Deuce Coupe. Oh, they're driving around a 2-seater car, and it says, oh, I got the pink slip daddy. They're going to say, oh, they all drove around in pink dresses because they have the pink slip. What is a pink slip, by the way? Okay, if you said it was a dress in your closet, I'd be nervous right now. Okay. You're right, it's title. So this is what they're going to come back and they're going to say, what does this mean? And these committees are going to say, this is what it means. And they're all going to stay in the safe harbor mutual consent. See, scholars aren't interested in information to help them make a decision today. They're looking for confirmation of others to justify an opinion they already have. So the guys that come along here and say, I challenge these people from the Middle Ages that made these ridiculous claims about these ridiculous archaeological sites, and these people buy it because it's been around so long, are wrong. See, when you challenge the status quo today, you're going to be in deep trouble. F.F. Bruce says, we must bear in mind that the cause of learning has often been promoted by scholars who are prepared to take a risk and expose their brain waves to the pitiless criticism of others. People are more interested in criticism than they are to finding the truth. So when you come out with new things, you're going to get clobbered. See, scholars want 3 things. They want prestige, they want to be promoted, and they want to be published. If you go to them and say, tell me about, do you believe in Noah's Ark? Ooh, that's going to ruin a career. They're not going to get published. They won't get promoted at the university system. So your students trundle off to college and universities, you know what they're going to get told? The Bible's not true. Nobody has the courage to say, hey, there was a flood. The Red Sea parted. Great miracles. I mean, we all see miracles every day, don't we? Has anybody in here seen a baby be born? Right? I just went out to lunch with my brother-in-law the other day, and he picked up the check. And folks, that's bigger than the Red Sea parting, if you know my brother-in-law. So I'm going to be talking to you today about a find that we have had recently. Is pertaining to the temple. Then I have 2 great scholars going to come on stage, and the timer's not going, so let me know when I have 15 minutes, will you, Ron? Okay. We're going to answer some questions, tough questions, on one of the most interesting subjects of our time. And that is, where is the temple located? And a couple of years ago, I would tell that to people. They had no idea. And this book, that I wrote, and Ernest Martin wrote, and others are now writing, are sparking like a wildfire of interest around the world. I didn't expect so many people saying this is truthful, and I didn't have so many people saying that it's absolutely wrong, that you're a heretic, that you're a blasphemer. I just called a heretic last week. In print. It's tough to go through that because I have a family and I have friends, and I try to put out the best information that I know. But in this environment, it's very hard, and that's why a lot of people are not coming forth with evidence that they found, because they're going to get clobbered. The blunt force of an internet committee will meet them, and it's going to be terrible. So with that in mind, I'm going to discuss the temple today as being in the city of David, and I'm the benefactor of Ernest Martin and his work, and David Seeloff is here today to answer some questions, who worked with Ernest Martin. Dr. William Welty will come up and make some comments as well. But the temple's in the city of David, folks. Now, I don't want to sell that to you. I'm going to tell you I'm convicted that that is the truth, and that if that is in fact the truth, that the city of David is the place of the temple, and we don't know for sure, and no one can say with absolute certainty, because in scholarship we're dealing with degrees of probability. The only thing you could say with empirical certainty are things involving physics or pure logic. Everything else is degrees of probability. We can put someone in jail for degrees of probability. They could even be killed in the electric chair or injection if degrees of probability. So if the temple is in fact in the city of David, as we're going to go through here and really quick go through that process, tomorrow's talk, please do not miss. Because if the temple is in the city of David, everything has to be recalibrated as to where Jesus was crucified. And after a year of digging around with rocks and doing research with some of the best scholars I know, I'm going to show you images tomorrow of the cliffs and the rocks that split and the tombs were opened up. Can I prove it? No. But the evidence is absolutely astounding. How did I get involved with this to begin with? Well, reading Ernest Martin's book was one of them, but then I, like a lot of you, have been to Jerusalem, and I read where it says Jesus left the temple in Matthew 24. It says Jesus left the temple, was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you not see all these things? All these things. Assuredly, I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another that shall not be thrown down. If you go to Jerusalem today, you're going to see this big high-walled structure. And and we've all seen the big gold dome, the iconic gold dome. And you know what's going on over there right now? There's a lot of fighting, isn't there? A lot of people are. It has been since history the most bloody place in all the world. More blood has been shed around there than any place throughout history, starting with the time of David. But Jesus is saying here in Matthew 24, he says, not one stone. The emphasis is all these stones. And if you go over there today, you see this huge ancient monolith that survived through history and is one of the largest religious memorial places that we have in the world. Now, Titus in 70 AD destroyed the temple. And we have Josephus that tells us not only was the temple was destroyed, Josephus went on to say that you wouldn't even know that there was a building there. You wouldn't know that there was one rock there. It was an empty field, left to trash, weeds, and grass. That's it. The temple was destroyed down to the very foundations. So when the Jews were removed, for instance, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, 135, all the way up until we have the time of Constantine, the people didn't, there was no Jews even allowed in the area to even see Jerusalem. And then we have 750-year-long periods through that time till now where no scholar was allowed on the Temple Mount. It just got lost. And when you have a nexus of greatness such as the temple, people will proclaim that it has to have a home, and so they'll say the Temple Mount, for instance. And we'll go through that in a few minutes. So what is the fort? What is that big high-walled fort-looking thing up there? It's a fort. I believe that the Temple Mount today is and was the Fortress Antonia. the Roman fortress that housed the 10th Roman Legion, other Roman legions throughout history. Josephus says during his time period that there were 6,000 men there, which is a legion, which require 4,000 support personnel. So you have a huge structure up there. Does Scripture say where the temple was located? Sure it does. It says, talks about the Jebusite city. Remember David took the Jebusite fortress? And when he went up the water shaft and he took that, he called it the stronghold of Zion. Nevertheless, David, this is 2 Samuel 5:7. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, that is the city of David. That is the city of David, the stronghold of Zion. If you follow these code words through Scripture, they're all pointing like flaming arrows to the city of David. Joel 3:17, so you shall know that I'm the Lord your God dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain. What is my holy mountain? Look it up in Isaiah. It means the temple. God is dwelling in the city of David, in his temple. 2 Chronicles 3:1, now Solomon began to build the temple at the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, at the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. The Bible's saying here where it's being built. Where is it saying? The threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. You see, at the time that the city of David was taken, there wasn't even anything on the Temple Mount. It was a big rock protrusion. It was the high ground that the Romans later took and claimed as a strategic place. That's the high walls going around it as a fortress. And Josephus says that the temple was looked down upon by the fortress. Then we go through and we see Eusebius, who was the curator of the library at Caesarea, the father of church history. The hill called Zion in Jerusalem, the building there, that is to say the temple, the Holy of Holies. The hill called Zion, that is to say the temple, the Holy of Holies, says it has been utterly removed and shaken down, fulfilling the word, fulfilling what Jesus says. Hecadius of Abdera said, from the time of Alexander the Great, the temple was nearly in the very center of the city of David. The Pilgrim Bordeaux in 330 says, well, you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and look east. He said, all you see is the great wall of the Roman fortress. And the pinnacle, the rock pinnacle there, was the place where Jesus was pronounced guilty, which is right underneath the dome, the Muslim dome today, if this is true. The Bordeaux saying, looking east, and you go to the to Church of Holy Sepulchre. There's a church next to it. You can climb up. I think it's a Lutheran church. You can go through the tower. You look due east. All you see is like you're seeing the back of this room, a long wall of the Dome of the Rock, the Haram. Now we have the point of water. Joel 3:18 says, a fountain shall flow from the house of the Lord. Is there any water on the Temple Mount? None. You were around back then, right? You're so old that you were around back there, right? There was no water. A fountain shall flow from the house of the Lord. There's no water on the Temple Mount. They had to the Romans couldn't put a toe in the water of the Gihon Springs in the city of David. That was off limits. That was holy water for purification for the temple. So there's the water coming in from South Bethlehem, the two aqueducts they brought. That was to give them water for the Romans. Aristeas says, he was a half century after Alexander the Great, said, there is an inexhaustible reservoir of water as would be expected from an abundant spring gushing up naturally from where? Within the temple. Water is coming up from within the temple. Roman historian Tacitus, roughly 400 years after Aristeas, and recorded that the temple had a natural spring of water that welled from its interior. Zev Valene quotes an ancient Hebrew writings in his book, says, at that time a great stream shall flow forth from the holy temple, and its name is Gihon. The Dead Sea Scrolls says, you shall make a channel all around the laver within the building. The channel runs from the building of the laver to a shaft, goes down and disappears in the middle of the earth, so that water flows and runs through it and is lost in the middle of the earth. Ezekiel 47 says, then he brought me back to the door of the temple, and there was water flowing from under the threshold of the temple towards the east. The water was flowing from under the right side of the temple, south of the altar. He brought me out by way of the north gate and led me around on the outside of the outer gateway that faces east, and there was water running out of the right side of the temple. What side did the water flow out from Christ? The right side. Then we have the Geniza documents that were come to us from the 7th century. From the Jews from Tiberias came and said, hey, we want to live by the temple. And the Omar there, the Caliph of Omar, says, hey, well, where do you want to? He says, we want to live by where the temple was. And where do they build? They'll build in the old market. They built in the city of David by the Gihon Springs. Acts 21 says, and all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Put on your cop goggles now, please, because the Bible's telling us a really great clue here. Acts 21. And the city was disturbed, and the people ran together and seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. He's on the north side of the temple. The doors are shut, and what happened? Now all the city was disturbed, and the people ran together, seized Paul, and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the commander of the garrison, that was the garrison of the Roman fortress, that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. He immediately took the soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander and the soldiers, they stopped beating him. Ran down to them? If the temple is on the Temple Mount, there is no stairs running down to it. There's no fortress in the sky. But if the temple is in the city of David, they would have ran down to them. Josephus talks about a 600-foot double colonnade that went across from the Roman fortress to the temple. Today, if you go measure, that's about 600 feet. Well, that's exactly what Josephus says. It's 600 foot. Now, another thing is we have this bronze coin that was found, and I'm going to go to a video here in a second. A friend of mine and a researcher, Bonnie Dawson, and my wife was over there during that time, and Craig Newmaker and others that have been with me in this room. Rhonda Sand. Talk about, Ellie was sitting around one day, and he was the former head of archaeology in the city of David. And he says, Bob, he says, there's a long wall that goes all the way down to bedrock in the Western Wailing Wall. Yeah, have you been down there? Anybody been down there? Okay. That wall goes down about 30 feet, right? And then it hits bedrock. Well, here's a cop thing for you. Ellie sits around one day, and he decides to dig under the lowest stone on the first layer or course of stones. And those stones are pretty big, right? They're big, some are big as a car. Ellie goes down, and he digs underneath, and he takes this little shovel thing, and he digs down, this little hand shovel, and he digs and digs and digs, and eventually he finds something. It's a little coin. The coin is of Valerius Gratus, who was the prefect of Rome. The coin dates to about 20 AD. Who's credited with building the Western Wailing Wall? Herod. If that coin is 20 AD, it cannot be any earlier than that. See, that's a bookmark in history. That coin tells us that it couldn't have been constructed any earlier than 20 AD. That's 24 years after Herod was dead. He did not build the Western Wailing Wall. So we have so many things coming at us from archaeology. We've got to rethink these things. And what is the whole point of this? Well, let me show the video. Let me show the video on the temple, and I'll walk you through it. And then we're going to have some guys come up. We're going to have some questions and answers. But I think you'll enjoy the video. It gives you some visuals. Hi, my name's Bob Cornuke, and we're in Old Jerusalem, and I'm about to take you on an expedition like you've never been on before. We're going to look for the lost location of Solomon's and Herod's temples. I believe that archaeology has really missed this one. I think that history is stunningly wrong saying that the Temple Mount is the place of where Herod's temples and Solomon's temples were located. So we're going to take out the Bible and we're going to use that as a road map and as a compass to solve this most ancient mystery.
About 63 BC, the Romans took this city. General Pompey had the gates opened up to him. And from that point on, the Romans had control here for over 300 years. The big question is, where did they stay? No one has ever found one brick that they know of that's from the Roman fortress. I believe it's because it's been on the Temple Mount. That was the Roman fortress, that huge complex. If you look at it today, it is in the same dimensions as many Roman fortresses throughout Europe. So where did the Romans stay? They stayed on the Temple Mount. And where was the temple? In the city of David.
I'm going to use a laser pointer. I'm going to go back and forth and screen so either side of the room can see this. Of course, this is the Dome of the Rock, the place. It's the third most holy site for Muslims. You know, they say that Muhammad went to heaven on his horse named Barak from there. You can't make this stuff up. That's the name of the horse. Okay, this is here in Syria. This is a Roman fort. This is the ruins of a Roman fort. Doesn't this look exactly like the Temple Mount structure? These are Roman forts throughout Europe. You know, Romans, for forts over there, they needed roads. They needed to have places for worship and for courthouses and for granaries and for barracks. And they needed all those things. And so, but you can see that all these maps here and all these drawings that we're showing you have a very strong similarity to Roman fortresses around the world. This is all matching up. Now you can see this fortress here, very close, matches up with the Temple Mount. Now, this area here, now pay attention to this here, okay? Because that's the old Roman fortress. That's the Antonia fortress that they say housed the 10th Roman Legion. This is what the second temple, or the temple of Herod, artists say look like. This is the Haram, or the Dome of the Rock complex today, underneath it. Notice this little area over there. There's the same area over here. In this drawing, that's about 350 feet by about 100 feet, okay? Now, this housed, according to these scholars, the 10th Roman Legion. And that the Romans, who were protecting and over the Jews, built for them a monstrous complex. You see, it's completely switched. It's completely switched. The Romans would not have done that. They would have said, we're here to keep control over you, but we're going to build you a huge, massive place, and we're going to take this little annex about the size of a garage. So I believe that this was the Roman fortress. It's ebbed and flowed. It had a mercurial construction about it over the years based on need and whatnot. So Jesus left the temple and he was walking away. You see that where it says he's walking away? What does that mean? He's not in the temple. He's some distance away we don't know the distance and calibration, but he was some distance. And then he uses the term, all these stones. All these stones. I've been around the Western Wailing Wall and I've met with several Jewish faithful, and they've told me, see, Jesus is a false prophet. He's a liar. He's wrong because look at all the stones we have here. It really breaks your heart when you're talking to them. Now, this red-in area, that's the city of David. That's the area that we're talking about. We're talking about David conquering the city of David. This is the Temple Mount. These rocks here, these stones are actually remnants of the Jebusite fortress. We're going to be seeing those on a tour coming up, but this is where David was standing close to some area where I'm standing right here. The people up on the wall, the Jebusite says even the blind and lame could defend this. So they went in and they conquered it. And what did David do? He named it the stronghold of Zion. The stronghold of Zion. This wall here shows you about the area of the stronghold of Zion. It was about a 12-acre area. Now, an artist has drawn in here the temple. A Russian artist did this for me. She was inspired. But that's just about right there. That 12-acre area was the Jebusite fortress. Joel 3:17 says, "So you shall know that I am the Lord your God dwelling in Zion, my holy mountain." We're talking about this. My holy mountain is the temple itself. Several verses are showing this. I know we're a little redundant, but there's a lot of information. We hope you can get this all through this. Now, David was approached by an angel of the Lord, and he said, "Buy the threshing floor from Ornan the Jebusite. Purchase it so that the deed of trust is transferred." So the warranty deed is forever. It was purchased. So there's no quibble over who owns this land and the purpose of it. 2 Chronicles 3:1 says, "Now Solomon began to build the temple at the house of the Lord at Jerusalem at the place that David had prepared on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite." Of course, the threshing floor has huge implications. That's where you see in prophecy, God will rule and reign, and then the millennial temple, and separate the wheat from the chaff, the believers from the unbelievers. So there's great significance for the temple being there through that. Now this water going here is from the Gihon Springs. We're going to be going through the Gihon. It's just water gushes through there. Has been going there for hundreds and thousands of years. Solomon here. Solomon is mentioned with the Gihon Springs. The Bible says, 1 Kings 1:38 through 39 says, "So Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, went down and had Solomon ride on King David's mule and took him to Gihon. Then Zadok the priest took a horn of oil from the tabernacle and anointed Solomon." Took a horn of oil from what? The tabernacle? The ark is there. The tabernacle's there, right where the temple's going to be. And where is this? In the Gihon Springs, in the Jebusite fortress, the former Jebusite fortress. So Solomon is anointed. And look at the horn of oil. Horn of oil is going to mean something in a moment. We're going to show you about that horn of oil. So let's see an artist rendering. If we're right on this, and like I said, these are hard things to prove. It's my best guess. But if I'm right on this, then this is where Solomon's temple would be, over the Gihon Springs, and the Roman fortress was up there. You see how the steps came down, by the way? You see the steps coming down? That was where the commander got Paul. We're here in this incredible archaeological site. And you can see there's several rooms in here. But this dates back to the time of the first temple. Right below my feet here is an olive press. You can see where the wood beam went in here and they ground the olives. Olives were very important for anointing someone going into the temple. So the olives were pressed here. And if we read Josephus, he talks about Aaron being anointed by Moses with the olive oil and the water, the rushing spring water. We also read in Scripture where Solomon was brought down by a mule to the Gihon Springs, right here, right in this area, right where we are. And he was anointed with the oil when he was a crowned king at the Gihon Springs, which is right where we are. And amazingly, archaeologists have recently uncovered this beautiful area that is dated to the first temple period. And it has within it, for instance, channels. If you look here, this is a channel right here where the blood ran. We have rings that were placed in here, probably brass rings of some kind, or bronze rings were placed here, which tethered the animal so they would be able to be sacrificed and killed. Archaeologists have told me that these V's in the ground held the supports when they killed the animals, and they used them for the blood sacrifices here in this sanctuary. Okay, this is a drawing here. I got to go on this side, I promise everybody. This side here, it's a drawing showing that's where the blood channels go. That's where the animals were put on the stanchions, and here's where they did the olive press. So this is an ancient, we believe it's part of possibly Melchizedek or Solomon's temple. This is Eli Shukran, who's the director of archaeology.
And this is a place in the city of David from the first temple period, even before the first temple period. And this gives us something about what's happened here. And as I say, we are in the city of David. We are in the citadel of Zion. This is the area of the citadel of Zion, here, where we're standing. And this is a place for worship, this is a place for praying, this is a place for a sacrifice, and this is a place where the people connect with the God.
How did this place get to be called the temple? I've done a lot of research. People might disagree with this, but you know, when the Crusades went over, it was a big thing. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. In 1099, they breached the walls July 13th, and then they put a cross on top of the dome. It wasn't gold then, but they put a cross. They called it Templum Domini. That's the Lord's house. So the temple of the Lord. So we have then becoming wildly popular in Europe that they have taken the Temple Mount, they recaptured the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and then all the way the march through history, we have people fighting over this place. In fact, the Dome of the Rock is today considered to be, like I said, very, very holy by the Muslims, and they have control over it. Through a weird set of posturing, they have control. And they say that if one Jew comes up here and puts a shovel up here to rebuild the temple, 1.2 billion Muslims will unite in a holy war like you've never seen before.
Okay, I've been a tour guide here for more than 13 years, and there's some amazing things that we're discovering now that are to the south of the Temple Mount area. And Solomon's temple is possibly really in this area, close to the city of David.
The fact that the scriptures say that temple was in the city of David, and it had to be near the Gihon spring. And I look at the Temple Mount, and there's no spring up on the Temple Mount. So I've become a firm believer in the fact that the temple was not up on the Temple Mount. I'm convinced it was right there in the city of David.
All the people who understand in these things, they say the temple is under the city of David.
Solomon's temple was in the city of David, at the Jezreelite fortress. I can't see how you can argue with 2 Chronicles 3:1. If we're going to take the Bible at face value, that's where Solomon's temple was.
There are certain places where your big challenge isn't finding new evidence per se. The biggest challenge is to set aside your presuppositions so they don't get in the way of discovery. I think that the position of the temple being in the city of David has merit, of course. It raises all kinds of other questions.
And questions they come, answers, we don't have all of them. But I think we're sitting at a very unique time where we find our cultures riding on the tip of the arrow through history. And it could be that we're living in biblical times when events are unfolding that are germane to the Bible and predicted in the Bible. And so with caution and humility, I'm standing on the stage here with some gentlemen that are helping me with this project. And if this is really true, if this is the Roman fortress and the temple is in the city of David, it means the Jews can now rebuild their temple. Now, I have up on stage a couple of gentlemen who I've grown to just love and admire, who've been a part of this project and this research project, which has been enormous. And a man that knows far more about this than I ever will, David Seeloff, and of course William Welty, who is an expert in his own right in many other things in the Bible. And they've been helping with this project because, quite frankly, there's just a handful of guys that are really running with this. And we have great opposition as well, which you would expect. I mean, look, we're going against tradition that's thousands of years old. So, David, I just like to ask you the first question. How did this temple get lost? And how easy is it going to be to convince people that this is the place of the temple? And do you believe this is the place of the temple?
Yes, starting with the last question, yes, this is the place of the temple. I'm a little more forceful than you are on this. Starting with Scripture as a foundation, and then the historical records and historical writings. And it, as you said, it doesn't fit the other place. How was it lost? it was lost because, as you described, they were away from the site for a long time, and frankly, tradition and dreams and visions, first with the Christians, then with the Muslims, and finally with the Jews, each step of the way, the new tradition was created, and it overwhelmed the historical record and the biblical truths. So that what you have today is a situation where it is so entrenched that it will take a new generation. And I'm thankful to you that you were able to gain interest of this to speed up the process.
Dr. William, the biggest negative I receive on this whole thing is, and people will throw this in my face and say 2 Kings 8:1 tells us the ark was brought up from the city of David in Scripture. And so people are saying it was brought up from the city of David, and it must mean that it's out of the city of David now. Can you explain what that was for?
Well, I did analyze that passage for Bob from the Hebrew text. And it's important to remember that the context of the passage in Kings 8 is a one-time event for the dedication of the temple under Solomon. Remember, the tabernacle was a very small building. And as Bob's pointed out, the area in the city of David was about 12 acres. It was not big at all in comparison to the Antonia fortress. And that land mass today is about 35 acres. Therefore, if you're on a one-time basis celebrating the opening of the finished temple, there's no room for all of the people that would be there. Therefore, you had to hold it someplace besides the temple. So they took the tabernacle from where it was being stored while the temple was being built, then they brought it up, had the ceremony in Jerusalem, and then moved it to its final resting place in the temple. That's why the text says they came up from the city of David. They had to. There wasn't room for the crowds. Thousands of bullocks were sacrificed, the text will tell you. There just wasn't any room. So it was a temporary, one-time fulfillment. And then, of course, the text doesn't have to tell you. Do you notice they took it back? What, do they think you're stupid? So that's why the text indicates that the tabernacle was moved. It was moved for the closing ceremony because they were shutting the thing down and moving the Ark of the Covenant to its final resting place in the temple. That's why it was moved. But it stayed in the city of David eventually. But for a opening ceremony only, they moved it off-site because it was just too big.
In Psalms 48, 9 through 7, it says, we have thought, O God, of your loving kindness in the midst of your temple, according to your name, O God. So is your praise to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is full of righteousness. Let Mount Zion, the temple location, let the daughters of Judah be glad because of your judgments. Walk about Zion and go all around her. Count her towers, mark well her bulwarks, consider her palaces that you may tell it to generations following. See, the problem is we haven't marked well her boundaries. We're instructed here in Psalm, there's an instruction to tell other generations based on what Scripture says and not what man says. And it says in Micah 3:12, which said, Zion shall be plowed like a field, Jerusalem shall become heaps of ruin, and the mountains of the temple like bare hills of the forest. The prophecy. Do we see the bare hills of a forest? We see those photos earlier in the 1930s photos. It shows those fields are actually being plowed. You can see the farms out there in the terraced fields. So, David, I'd like to ask you, it seems like the Bible is crying out that this is the place of the temple. What do you see in the future prophetical realm about the temple, and what do you see about what's going to happen with the Jews' resistance for this?
I think there will, well, this is kind of a personal thing, but I think there will be discoveries, more discoveries related to what you're working with. And that this will, I think what Zechariah 14 is talking about, the spirit of grace and supplication, is about to occur. I can't give you a time frame, But that will start the continuation of the book of Acts to finish the job. This is a personal idea, and I have information that we want to develop with archaeologists before I really go on film on this kind of stuff.
Okay, well, two quick questions for you, and then we'll jump to William. The eastern gate, Christ is returned there, and everybody will point, every tour guide will point that out on the Haram. And then the water situation. We have to have water for this to be the temple location?
Yes,
spring water.
There was an eastern gate, but of course there's no stone upon another, so that gate is no longer there. The eastern gate on the Haram Al-Sharif, the so-called Temple Mount, was originally the one that you can see from the ground level. It was built by the Muslims. Underneath it is a Byzantine gate, and there's nothing underneath that. Regarding the water, there has to be water, living water, and there has to be a lot of it. And as Bob said, there is no living water coming into the Haram Al-Sharif. There are massive, massive cisterns, and that's not good enough. As Jeremiah says, you're using cistern water because you're being evil, and I've shut off the flow. Aqueducts from Bethlehem, of which there's no evidence that they were built in Solomon's time, but there is that they were built in Pilate, during the time of Pilate. That water is absolutely necessary, and you need a lot of it to wash away the blood, as the good doctor said here, because you were at thousands, as Josephus says, even in his day, thousands of beasts were sacrificed and during the feasts. So you needed massive amounts of water, and the Gihon supplies that. It pumped water. It was a karst spring. And I've had U.S. Geological Survey hydrologists tell me that, yes, like Old Faithful without the heat, you can, on those streams, pump up water up 40 stories. And we have historical records from Tacitus, from Aristeas, from 180, 150, or maybe 200 BC, that there were fountains in the temple at the top. Irrefutable. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the Copper Scroll, talks about a treasure at the gate of the fountain. He's talking about the temple. That's a third source, and there's others. Besides the numerous scriptures that say that there's a lot of water down there, and it gushes and it flows and it makes a lot of noise.
Dr. William, did you have anything, because we're running out of time. Can we keep about a two-minute wrap-up here for all of us to just close this thing out real quick? What are your thoughts on this research since I've come to you? What are your personal thoughts on this as far as prophecy goes? How this relates to prophecy?
I think we're in the high 90th percentile that we've got the right location for the original temple, and that has some implications. I don't mean to be critical, but truth is truth. And frankly, I don't care what the doctoral dissertations the other guys say. When you add up the sum of it, with all due respect, the Temple Institute is wrong. They're trying to rebuild the temple, and they're using the instruments that are taken from the Talmud, which are descriptions from Herod's temple. There is a minority report view, and that is being propounded by a fascinating rabbi by the name of Chaim Chlorfen. I tried to get him to come here and do a conference seminar on the temple. His son is a world-class AutoCAD computer 3D designer. And he took the scriptures from the original Hebrew in Ezekiel and developed a three-dimensional temple rendering. I've seen it. It's absolutely fascinating. And he says the temple, when it's rebuilt, will not be a Herodian model because that was considered blasphemous. And as Josephus said, God hated it so much he tore it from the earth. Now, why that's relevant is because the old-style classical rabbis in Jerusalem today buy the Chaim Richman view. The younger generation doesn't care. let them have it. Let's build it someplace else. If we can demonstrate that the temple was in a place other than the Temple Mount, they'll be interested in putting it there. And I've pointed out to Bob, there's a possibility when they do rebuild it, they may not quite get it right because we don't know where it was. And there's evidence in the book of Daniel that when the abomination comes, it's very obscure biblical language there. It says, on the wing of the temple, they will set up the abomination. And the word wing is an architectural term that's used only once in Scripture for a portion of a building. It was not in common use in Daniel's day. It meant the fringe of a garment. I think what he's warning us is that when they rebuild it, they won't quite get the original place right. So when the Antichrist comes to muck it up, they won't have it in the right place. If you're not so proud to seek it there, Indiana Jones, they're looking in the wrong place.
Well, we've run out of time. And I want to thank you all for your kind attention and allowing me to have some good friends on the stage. The gracious introduction by Chuck is very, very humbling. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the crucifixion site based on the temple location. Please, please don't miss this. It's absolutely going to be a stunner what you're going to see. Okay, thank you for having me.